war. So I did not come about a book that is about the peacetime that are in between the wars. Did you come about such a book, and can you recommend it?
So the early literature of the Seerah, or the Maghazi literature, right? So one of the things that we see about Rasul's life is that...
Oh, please, repeat the questions if the sisters can...
Oh, okay, so the question was, I feel like it's a very good question, I feel like it's like is that for those, many of the works with regards to Seerah, there was a heavy emphasis on the war periods, on the Ghazw periods, but not so much on the peace periods, the peacetime periods in between, right? Now, as Rasul becomes more and more known by more and more people, and as Islam is spreading, more people are writing. So in the early part, if you look at the early part of the Seerah books, they're taken from hadith that Rasul has mentioned to people, but the accounts are not from many people. And then as we get to the Medina phase and so forth, more people are seeing Rasul, more people are engaging with him, more people are writing down accounts of what they experienced and so forth. And so that latter period increases. And the works from the Ghazw in particular were extensively written by many people. And so that's why there's a large emphasis and a large amount of documentation on the Ghazw period. And then in the peace periods, generally battles are events. So it's one event that might happen for a couple of days. But peacetime is a prolonged period of time. So to have that consistency of writing like that is often missing. So this is why in so many of the Seerah books you'll see large gaps between one battle and another, because the way that we document is that we tend to document key moments, milestones. And peacetime isn't a milestone, it's a period. So in between them. But in between those peacetime moments, you will see certain things that were mentioned, like during this moment the Muslims did such and such, and during this moment the Muslims did such and such. And so this is why you don't actually have that. But I haven't seen anything in English, I can tell you, and even in Arabic perhaps, that's extensively written on those peacetime moments. But we do have evidence of peacetime moments. I mean, like for example, when sometimes Rasul used to go on some of the expeditions, he would leave an Ansari person behind to rule over Medina. We know this, it happened. And so forth. So there are many things that were taking place, and people were documenting Rasul's here for what's happening in Medina there. And we have documentation even regarding things that happened before Rasul's arrival. So the wars between the Persians and the Byzantines, or the Romans. This is important actually. When Rasul enters the dunya, he enters in a time where there is a conflict between two major powers. And the peninsula of Arabia is actually sort of like unscathed by this, which allows the dawah to go forward. And then later in Rasul's life, we have Surah Rum that actually then tells us that these wars between these two entities that were happening for so long, they're about to come to an end, and so on. And but we need contemporary works for sure. I mentioned Sheikh Bhutti's work not for any political reasons, but just because in his seerah he said that the modern Muslim mind needs prescriptive ways of reading. Prescriptive meaning, in the past we were descriptive. This happened, then that happened, and this happened. Whereas today people want to know why and how, and can you link it to me? Because of modern education, and that requires a new type of writing perhaps, and I think that's needed for sure. There you go.
You spoke about three-generation plan. Often today you are very focused on the now. You often forget the past, but also focus in the future. So what is your personal three-generation plan, and what would be a good three-generation plan for this part?
I mean, it's not for me to tell you what you should be doing as a community. I'm an outsider. I'm really reluctant, as you know, sometimes we come in and we tell everyone in the communities what they should be doing and what they shouldn't be doing. But I think a three-generational plan in this masjid should be beyond just that this is a masjid space for people to pray. That in fact, this center could become a hub for knowledge production. And I think knowledge production is important. And we are in a space right now where the university is a 19th century institution struggling in the 21st century. Okay, there's the internet and different modes of learning and studying, and maybe we should think about different ways of teaching. And one of the criticisms I often had of our masajids in England is we didn't have any libraries. We built places to pray, but nowhere for anyone to read. The children need books. It's a known adage that parents who have books in the home, children read those books. If you have a library in your house, the chances are the child is going to pull that book out and read it. So I think in terms of going forward, in terms of projects here, teaching and learning should be part of that project, okay, especially in a university city. So we need books here, we need libraries here, so that the kids are not just this. You know, when I talked about haq and batil, for example, the kids had let me know that I should finish soon, is that when Rasulullah went into the cave, he separated himself from Makkah itself because of the madness, the chaos of Makkah. That he went into etikaf into the cave because of the hustle and bustle of Makkah. We are now bringing the hustle and bustle of the city into our homes. We need to do etikaf from this. We're not, we're constantly on it 24/7. I lived in Japan and one Japanese thinker told me, he goes, you know, you Muslims, you do tasbih. I said, yeah. He goes, but now your kids are doing this. The dopamine is their tasbih. They're not even using their hands to remember Allah. This has become an extension of their hand, this device, and so forth. The more we're giving them this, and the less we're giving them this, then naturally they're going to turn to this. I met a sister, she had a niqab in London, and her son was crying on the bus, so she gave him the phone and she put on the cartoon. And then when she got off, I said, look, can I speak to you for a second? I said, you wore the niqab so that nobody could see you, but then you brought the fitna into your home with this. You brought it directly into your house. Understand, stop giving this device to your child who's only 6. This is madness, don't do this. So we have to create mechanisms and structures here that can navigate. I'm not saying to abandon this is a reality, I get it. But we have to find ways of offsetting that. And often people, when they have massages, they want to create community centers, table tennis, sports and so forth. But knowledge production is important for our communities. And we should facilitate a way of doing that. And that would be my generational plan, inshallah. So he had his hand up first. Okay, you can go.
In the history lens, how has the modernity and the secular state inflicted on the Muslim identity and the history? Maybe.
So the question is in the historical lens, how has modernity and secularism historically impacted us? I think it's, so Malik bin Nabi, who's a famous Algerian thinker, he talks about Muslims. He takes an idea from Ibn Khaldun. So Ibn Khaldun, the thinker, said that the defeated people, once they are defeated, their souls start to replicate the behavior of the victors. And then Malik bin Nabi took that idea and said, the problem with the Ummah was not that they were colonized, is that they were colonizable. Right? And he felt that because they were colonizable, this is why it happened. Now, I disagree with Malik bin Nabi a little bit. I don't think the Ummah was totally colonized. I think the lands were colonized for sure, but the Ummah is still vibrant. But there was a contagion. There was a contamination for sure. And that secular modernity has also contaminated this Ummah to the point that we think in the modern zeitgeist. And that needs to shift, that needs to change. The Shahada is very interesting because the Shahada is not simply an idea of resistance. It's an idea of rejection. La ilaha illallah. Right? And Muslims need to come to terms with that they have to be brave enough at times to reject certain things regarding modernity. At other moments they're going to have to negotiate with it. It's here. But secular modernity impacted the Ummah just like it impacted anyone else, but I've traveled the world extensively to see there is still a resistance in this Ummah. For sure there is. This is why we're getting pulverized as much as we're getting pulverized, unfortunately. I mean, the threat is China for them politically. Then why are they trashing the Palestinians? Because fundamentally, I think even in the West, they understand that Islam as an idea is still civilizational and it's global, and it needs to be put into a box. And I think this is something we need to consider and think about, perhaps. And so we should understand our predicament right now, and we should consider trying to change that, for sure. But have we been impacted by modernity? I think so. But alhamdulillah, we have not totally submitted to it. We are an exception there. Yeah. Go on, Hussein, you wanted to add to that? Oh, okay, so for those of you who don't understand modernity, so modernity is the idea of our current contemporary predicament, which is the secularization of societies to the point where religion becomes something that you just practice. We live in a modern age in which the way that we use our technologies, to the way that we understand our legal practices, to the idea of the nation state itself, are all understandings of the modern world that we live in. The assumption is that these ideas are going to be here forever, right? But the nation state is a modern construction, just like, you know, and even secularism to some degree. I just mentioned the Shahada to you. Allah Ta'ala, when we say the Shahada, La ilaha illallah, Allah is not mentioning atheists. He's mentioned nobody's worthy of worship but Allah Ta'ala, meaning that even the atheist worships. You just need to figure out what they are worshipping. And in many ways, secularism is you could say a religious system. Right? It's not, insan's fitra needs to worship something. What they have done, however, is they've removed Allah as being centered to them, and they've replaced it with themselves. Right? And what's important for insan to understand, and I said about haqq and batil, in order to understand what it means to be human, you need to understand, for example, that Allah exists. You need to understand you have a soul. You need to understand there's a heaven and a hellfire. If you take away all of these ideas, you reduce insan to just simply how they feel. And that's a problem, right? And it's a reduction of what it means to be human. Whereas Islam has a more wholesome. So in the secular idea of life, the modern idea, it's to reduce that as being secondary, if you choose to, which means it reduces the notion of human beings. That technology needs to tame and control nature, and that everything is for how human beings feel today, and that we are progressing into the inevitability, which is a collective godless society. But this is not inevitable, and this is something we can change. And there are now theories, they call it demodernization theories, and so forth.
You mentioned some who taught the Sirah in the chronological order of Wahid.
Yeah.
I don't think you mentioned your name.
No, I don't remember his name myself, to be honest with you.
Do you have like a recommendation for where you can find such resources?
So I never saw resources, I saw that being taught live. I've never seen a book like that. So I saw it taught live, unfortunately. But I mean, an enterprise of that nature would be a huge enterprise in book format. It would require a lot of writing. But I just thought it was a wonderful experience to see that.
Where did you see it was taught?
In Al-Azhar. So I was in the Azhar when I was there for 2 weeks. And then I saw somebody doing something similar. I heard somebody do something similar in Syria when I was in Syria as well. Yeah.
Did not Sayyid Qutb do something like that? He's in Egyptian, right?
Did Qutb, I'm not sure if Qutb did Syria in that way. Maybe he did. I don't know if Milestones has that sort of like idea. I'm not sure. I don't know. Yeah. Okay.
I really like the idea of the second chance for us, but do you think we deserve it? So this is the first question. The second question is how to take all those theoretical ideas and learnings from history and really put it in a practical terms. Like, what is the roadmap for us? Because it's becoming really overwhelming for us to read plans and roadmaps, and we don't do anything by the end of the day. Like,
it's a valid point. So the first thing, do I think we deserve a second chance? We have no choice. We have to, if we only deserve it if we put in the effort to ask Allah Ta'ala to give us that. And you know, if we don't do it, Allah Ta'ala will create a new generation that will do it.
Right.
I'm a little concerned these days because I'm seeing a lot of scholars passing away. And it reminds me of the hadith that Allah Ta'ala takes people of knowledge away one by one. But Allah Ta'ala also says in the Quran that, like I said, He gives us the opportunity to make that change. So we have to behave in the way that we are deserving. We've got no choice here in this sense. So I ask Allah Ta'ala in His rahmah that He accepts it from us. But this then goes to the second point, which is I think that theory needs to be turned into practice by people like ourselves. I remember reading about Sayyidina Abu Bakr and he said about Rasulullah, he said he cried with us, he laughed with us, he was there with us in Badr, he was there with us in Uhud. For any practical change that we want to make in the community, those of us who are thought producers, we can't be sitting in the ivory towers. We have to be with the community, we have to suffer with them, we have to enjoy our activities with them and so forth. And I think at the moment, there is a confusion in terms of the chaos at the moment. And I think this is the time when we start to try to put those plans onto the table. I will be honest and say I don't have that clarity right now. But I'm in the process of thinking about it. And the Ta'ala in the Quran talks about tafakkur and tadabbur. Tafakkur is to reflect on what I'm saying. Tadabbur is the long period of time. And so when you see, like when Rasulullah is in the cave, he's doing tadabbur. He's going to the cave all the time. So he's thinking about the problems of the ummah. When I spoke about Iqbal, when I spoke about Khaldun and so forth, these are works of tadabbur. And so we need that in this community too. We need people who are contemplated over the long period, and then from that solutions may emerge. But you're right, the everyday practice is also needed. But that's a conversation we should be having more and more openly.
Right.
And
Right.
it's okay for us to say we don't know. Then let's have those conversations, inshallah. So I agree with you, for sure. Yeah. What question do you have?
I have a couple of questions about the Ottomans. That's why I'm.
So I can answer those questions, but we have here all day. My concern is we have 10 minutes for iftar, and it's getting louder and louder, which is like I can tell. Listen. So, but if you want to ask a question on the Ottoman Empire, it's 24 minutes. Oh, okay. Yeah, go for it.
I was thinking about two things. The first, both are relevant to each other. That is the Ottomans, the late Ottomans. I guess they had a picture being made of them, and they were used. And the question is, according to the Hadith, it's not permissible to make pictures of living beings.
Yeah.
Still, the Ottomans that were the crowns of the Hadith still made this. The question is how they legitimize this, and then coupled to that would be the reasoning behind how they legitimize. They just take points from the West, which also caused big problems for all what's happening from the Islamic point of view.
Yeah, so the first question was, the question is about the Ottoman Empire and them images being drawn. So in the Tanzimat period, we're talking about, well, prior to the Tanzimat, we've seen the time of Mahmud II. So between 1808 to 1839, we start to see that paintings were being done of the Ottoman sultans. The majority of those paintings were not done by people in the Ottoman Empire. They were done by European artists that just made their way into. But Mahmud II in particular did have paintings done of him. It was controversial. The ulama didn't like it. So when he had those paintings done, it wasn't something, and he was sending those paintings to people to hang upon their walls. And they were deadly against it in many ways. This is why you don't see any images of Abdul Hamid II. Because Abdul Hamid was against this type of painting. And during the time of Abdul Aziz, so the uncle of Abdul Hamid, there was a statue done of him on a horse. And the Sultan's own mother took they got the statue and they threw it into the river. So it was controversial at times when some of the Sultans had these images done. So when Abdul Aziz, who was a painter, did paintings of battles, he blurred people's faces as a way of trying to do that. So, but no, it was controversial. Some people, the last caliph, for example, was a painter. and he did actual paintings, but even then, he kept it within his private house. He never put it out into the public, and so on. But the paintings, a lot of the paintings we know, they've been done by European artists, and so forth. So yeah, there were other painters afterwards who took a more looser position, where some people said that paintings could be done on flat spaces and so on. And there was a difference of opinion there. Now, regarding the interest-based loans, that was a complicated matter. The way that they calculated it, from what I understand, is when they were trying to modernize the empire, they were falling behind, and they were incapable of competing with the colonial powers when it came to resources. So colonization, you could take what you wanted and so forth. And Mahmud II was stuck because the Muslims were not given the permission, according to Islam, to colonize and to take people's resources. So as a consequence of that, how do you compete with that modernization? So what he did is he started confiscating parts of land from rich people and increasing taxation. But that became very unpopular. And the ulama then said that this was unacceptable. So in order to close the gap, they couldn't heavily tax their communities, they couldn't confiscate land from the rich, and they couldn't do colonization. So they were stuck in this place of financially being able to compete. So the ulama came up with an agreement of borrowing loans from Western European banks as what I would say, a lesser of evil, perhaps, thought process. But that was also controversial. There were many ulama who disagreed with that. And then I'm not an expert on this part of Hanafi fiqh, so I don't want to talk too much on it, but I will say I have heard this, that they made the argument that it wasn't interest direct. Just like how somebody goes to an Islamic bank today, and they say it's not interest, but but the house is being sold to us to double the amount and blah blah blah. So there was some technicality they went around, but there was a lot of criticism of that as well. There was a lot of criticism of that. So yeah.
One question from the audience about the Ottoman Empire and the Arabs. Why did they work against?
So the idea that the Ottomans and the Arabs were against each other is actually a bit of a misgiven. There were many members in the Arab provinces who were actually on the side of the Ottomans in the war. There was a small faction of Arabs who sided with the British, but the tensions mainly occurred from centralization and decentralization. The Arabs wanted more autonomy in the Ottoman domains, and the Young Turk government believed that the state should be more centralized, and that created tensions, and those tensions became exacerbated during the war period. But there were many people in the war who fought on the side, who were Arabs, who fought on the side of the Ottomans. The agitation, the ethnic agitation, doubled down after the creation of the nation states. So when the nation states were created, then the otherizing happened. And one of the things about national identity is that nationalism doesn't tell you who you are, it tells you who you are not. What I mean by that is, so if I'm from England, right? And I'll say I'm from England, and there'll be a racist person say, you're not from England, you're not English. And I say, what does it mean to be English? And he will say, I watch football. I say, I watch football. I eat fish and chips. I eat fish and chips. Well, I speak English. I speak English. Yeah, but you're brown, right? So the idea of nationalism is not defining who you are, because you can't define it. You have to define who you are not. I'm not Muslim, I'm not Arab, I'm not Pakistani, I'm not French. And that sort of like contamination obviously happened in the Muslim world too. And so as a result, the various nations started to otherize people by saying we are not that. Now the unique thing about the Shahada, you say La ilaha illallah, you're saying who you are. Actually, you say who you are. So this is an important point. So those narratives of tensions are more nation state narratives, backpedaling and then rewriting the history to say that we hated each other. But it's actually a lot more fluid than that. You can't rule a people for 400 years with the boot on the neck. we can see the world right now. People try to break it up. It wasn't perfect, for sure. There were tensions throughout, but the tensions of World War One were the concern of Sharif Hussein in particular and some of his faction, that if the Ottoman Empire collapses, we want some level of independence. And the Ottomans saw that as treason. But there were many Ottomans who were fighting with the Ottomans who rejected that movement. But then Sharif Hussein was successful because the British had won the war. The Ottomans had failed. And then the British renegaded on them too, and so on. So the question is the famous TV series Ertuğrul Diriliş? Just to let you know, it's not real. I'm sorry to break your hearts for those of you that think it's real. It's a TV show, it's fiction, but we call it historical fiction. Initially, I used to think that as a historian, this type of historical fiction is problematic. Now I don't have a problem with it, so long as it's explained that it is historical fiction. Fictional works are important because they still help people understand abstract ideas and they can resonate with them. And sometimes you can speak more truth in fiction than you can in real historical works. It can happen. I always ask people who like Abdul Hamid II, for example, well, why do you like Abdul Hamid II? You never met him. It's not because they like him as a person. They like the idea of what he represents. And so the reason why Diriliş Ertuğrul became so famous is because of the idea of what it represented, which was a Muslim leader who was upright, who was pious, who was brave, who was honest, and so forth. And these are values that we subscribe to as Muslims. And we want to see in our leadership, whether it's local or global. And the fact that there's an absence of that, perhaps, is the reason why the show became so popular, right? And so this is why the TV show. So as a form of fiction, I don't have a problem with it, in that sense. But as but I have to admit that it's not actual reality, unfortunately. Listen, I need to take my dad's calling, so I just need to take this. Okay. Sorry, my dad's on the phone. I just need to take this. I'm trying to sort out his medication from here.
Eller är man ute? Och så kommer man till alla som pratar arabiska kan vara kan det vara arabiska så det är inte så. Du kan ju, alltså jag funderar på om jag skulle trycka ut den och ha den i så. Ja, ta det. Det ligger mycket.
Okay, so the last question before you get to eat place like a Muslim is, for people here today, where can they learn history? Where can they study history? Now this is always going to be a difficult thing. One of the reasons why I started to write this book and so forth was I felt that we didn't have enough community spaces where history is being taught. I think the first thing I'll say to you is any historians that we have in our communities, in the universities and so forth, that we ask them to engage with the community, to close that gap. The second thing is that we need to start to produce work locally in our communities, and that can be done. I often get asked, we don't have any books for our children. What books can our children read? What I usually say is, as a community, we can write children's books. So then write the children's books, and then we'll find publishers for you to publish for the community. Basic 101 doesn't need any in-depth history. I can then just overlook it, right? So I think there should be some community initiatives of writing history books for the communities. There should be community initiatives of writing history about Muslims here right now, about people in the community and so forth. And then I think what we need to do going forward, and this is a deficiency in Muslims globally unfortunately, is we need to try to create centers of learning. Now, right now we can't train historians overnight. We might have to create workshops where we have 2 3-day workshops. We invite a historian from wherever he may be or she may be to teach the community that basics so that we can build the community, and then gradually we can go from there. Yeah, so I will tell you something now, I don't make much money. And so this is why I would say that we have to find community ways of funding them. So if I came as a scholar, now I'm not asking for this right now, but I'm just saying, let's just say you wanted a scholar from Norway, or a scholar from Stockholm, or so forth. What you do as a community is you put money together where the scholar is getting paid the going rate, so that when they do that 2 3-day workshop, they're catered and facilitated for. And then, like I said, you have scholarship bursary programs where we're saving money so that when young people want to go to university, the community can facilitate them because they're representatives of the community. And then they will be at the university, but they'll be teaching here too. And they'll be that backwards and forwards. Or if there are students who are doing PhDs here, then the community invites them to the masjid and gives them a small stipend so that they can teach on the weekends at the masjid or something. We're going to have to get creative as a way of doing that, but we do need to find a way of facilitating the financial needs of these scholars, because it's not easy. Look, maybe in a communal level we might not have much money, but this ummah does have money. It's just putting it into the wrong projects. The most important thing that Rasulullah did is he invested in the Sahaba, not in the buildings, not in the institutions. They were the institutions. He invested in them in people, and then when he knew that his time was coming to an end, and the hadith is famous, he puts the curtain, he looks at them, and he's content. And after he died, they went to every corner of the planet. So we have to invest in people. We have to find financial models that are going to do that, to support the community so that there's self-sustenance. There's only so much we can do in terms of donations. And even in Ramadan, I get tired of people asking for donations for everything. There has to be some type of self-sustaining model where money is being made locally and then being put into the community locally. And there has to be local businesses that are sustaining these type of models where they're supporting students and scholars alike. And the people of ilm are one of the people that come into the categories of zakat, by the way, as an indication of the importance of this act. So I used to give my students zakat all the time, and they used to say to me, "But teacher, I have money." I said, "No, I'm fulfilling the action itself, the barakah, that this is a sunnah that still needs to be committed to, right? And so we should be doing that too. I think that's important. So yeah." So I've been told 3 books that I would recommend for beginners. It's a difficult one for me because it's so large, but in English, any Sira book you can pick up that's easy to understand, I would recommend that. I think Martin Links is a little bit difficult, but I think Mubarak Puri is good, I think Bhutti's is good, I think Muhammad al-Ghazali is good. In terms of Sira books, those are good ones to read. Wada Khanfar more recently has written a book in English on the Sira. I found that interesting. I think Firaz al-Khatib's book has become the standard on Islam as a civilization. I think Firaz would agree with me that the book is deficient, but as a 101 it's not a bad book still. It's still lacking in many places. Oh, I forgot now. I'll find out. Yeah, Lost. Yeah, that's the one. The Lost Islamic History, that one. And then, I don't know, everything else needs to be negotiated with, really. Because writing is a subjective experience. It's objective in the sense that you're trying to establish what is true, but it's subjective in the sense that you're writing from your perspective. And history is always going to be an interpretive vocation, and that's going to be the biggest challenge here. So this is my concern. But usually what I can do for the community is I can write a list of areas which I think they should explore. But that's a challenge we're having, that when people say, what do we read? And I get nervous in many ways. But I'll write a list for you to help you write. Just, yeah. Yeah. No, I totally understand. So for those of you who didn't hear the question, the question is like, so when I was taught history, for example, I was taught that the Muslims were perfect. And then as I started picking up the books, actually, and so as the university I was in, Western University, it was the Western academics who were exposing to us the history and say, look, you Muslims will be able to see. And for some Muslims that was troublesome. I honestly believe that history should be taught in the classroom. In the Islamic tradition, we write books to be read, to be taught. It comes from the Quran. So we write a book, and then we sit there, and then we teach. In the Western tradition, they write books to be read. You take it away and you read it. The idea is that it gives the individual the agency when they engage in with it. But the problem is that if you have any problem areas with the book, you've internalized it. But when it's being taught, if someone has a problem area, you can address it. That's why the classroom environment in Islam is so important, and the teacher is so integral to the learning process. Whereas in the West, the teacher can be bypassed. And this is why you see people even self-diagnosing themselves on the internet with sicknesses. We bypass the specialist, the information is sufficient for me. And so we have to create a culture of teaching again. This is why even these books, they need to have teachers or book clubs or something of this nature where there's an engagement, where there's some maturity, where people can explain these things to one another. When I taught I remember the death of Uthman bin Affan, a lot of my students for the first time when they heard that, they were shocked. But because I was mature enough, I was able to help them through it. And now they understand that Muslims are not perfect. That doesn't mean also that we should be writing history that overlooks what we did. We have to own it. Because otherwise, if we give a rose-tinted understanding of Muslims, and then that's not the reality, it will break them. So this is why the emotional maturity of the one teaching is needed. We always look at IQ, but we don't look at EQ. And Rasul had exceptional emotional intelligence, and I think this is required as well in the teaching process. And I think that's one way of circumventing it.